Welcome, everyone. I'm Byron Tate, editor of the Pine Bluff Commercial, and we have another segment of the Newsroom. We haven't done this in a while. It's not like we've been on hiatus in support of the writer's strike, but you know, they're back and so are we. So welcome. Today we have Representative Vivian Flowers with us. Welcome, Vivian.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And first off, I want to just, this is Representative Flowers' first time on the program, and I'm just going to ask her to tell us a little about herself. And I know the redistricting changed your district a little bit, so describe the area that you represent.
So my district was District 17 when I was first elected up until this year. District 17 was comprised of part of Pine Bluff, and District 65, which is what I represent now, is comprised of part of Jefferson County. So before, I represented the north side and the west side pretty much, and then the center of the city, downtown, all the way up to, before you get to Jack Roby, all the way up to Watson Chapel, and the other way, all the way up to Whitehall. And now I represent pretty much that same area, but now I also represent Altimer, Wabaseka, Sherrill, and Humphrey. Okay. And Humphrey, a little smidgen of Arkansas County.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So this is a little off topic, but in that redistricting, they have chopped up the second district, right? In the central Arkansas area. Mm-hmm. Is that still under, there was a lawsuit filed?
There still is a lawsuit, I think, that is being litigated. Yeah. Yeah, and we had some, I don't know if this is a word, but I'm going to make it up and people will know what I mean. We had some splittage yes. here as well. This whole area used to be part of the 4th congressional district, and now it has split Jefferson County between the 4th and the 1st congressional district. And a lot of that was to basically dilute the minority vote. You know, the vote of Democrats was already diluted, so that it wasn't political. This strictly racial. You know, dividing up Little Rock and Pine Bluff, your two largest black populations in the state, the way that it's been done was to make it so that there would be no major population that could trip the vote in any direction. And so whereas before you had the 1st and 4th districts with relatively large populations of black people, and then the 3rd district, very few, and the 2nd district had a relatively significant, like in the 20-something percentile. Now everything, all 4 districts have about a 20-something odd percentile population of black people, and that's to keep our vote diluted.
I know the Little Rock district, or the district that used to include Little Rock, was always a tease. Mm-hmm. It's like, maybe the Democrats can pull one out here. They never did. Right. But I think it's under the redrawing, there's like no way that they're going to.
Right.
Hold on. I know we're live, but I don't know what's going on with it. Sorry, everybody.
Technical fixes.
Yeah.
The joy of being live. Say something, Byron.
Testing.
Okay, hold on. Say something again.
Hi, Vivian.
Okay.
Hi, Byron. Oh, wow.
We can get all the behind the scenes.
Could we put her mic in the middle of the table?
No, you're fine. Okay, say something.
Testing.
One more time.
One more time. Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Go ahead.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, I see you.
Is that good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Okay.
So the Little Rock district always, Little Rock district, the second
Mhm.
district always had this, like maybe, it's like it didn't get all that close, but it got, I guess, a little uncomfortably close. So now we have split up.
Right.
The Republicans have split up Little Rock. And now that hasn't flown very well in Alabama.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think unexpected, really, on the part of Black people, Black leaders, especially on the federal level, and Democrats on the federal level.
The Supreme Court just didn't want to hear it again
Yeah.
and said, you have, well, they were told don't do that, and then they did it again. So now I think a magistrate is actually,
It'll be interesting to see how the law is applied
Yeah.
and with what level of speed, because we know it took 20 years for Brown versus Board to somewhat be applied.
Yeah, that's right.
So we'll see.
So let's talk about the special session that just happened.
Yeah.
There was this idea that there was some safety factor involved, although that was even Republican commentators said, what safety issue could there have been, after the fact? And then there was the attempt to dismantle the FOI. You were there. What? Give us some ground level perspective from your seat.
I knew that this was going to be a very serious and unifying issue for the state, and it wasn't even a divisive issue for Republicans, really, because I think that for many who signed on, I don't think realized how important government transparency is to Arkansans. I knew that already because I had passed a bill back in I think it was the 2017 session, to expand FOIA, and that was the first time FOIA had been expanded in a really long time. So I ended up getting
Yeah, usually it's
an
going like
award.
this.
Yeah, I ended up getting the an award from I believe from the Press Association.
Yeah.
For that. And I mean, it was completely unexpected. I was responding to, a void that I saw, and without going into the details of, what happened with a supporter, I realized, hey, technology is such that we could be, recording, at least audio recording, if not video recording, all public meetings. Everybody subject to FOIA can use their phone. They can go live on Facebook, and it's free. You can set up a Gmail account and, send your recordings to a dedicated Gmail account. And if somebody who had to work and wasn't able to attend the meeting wanted to see it, or if the press wanted to see it, you just forward it to them. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I had worked for the Bureau of Legislative Research back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, early millennia, and the state had a system that for recording, and I was the committee secretary. That was an expensive system at the time. The internet was really non-existent, and in early millennia, brand new. Most people had access to the internet at work. That's not where we were. So when I posed the legislation, the interesting thing, if you look on the list of co-sponsors in the House and Senate, it's this, motley crew of legislators who normally would be completely, in opposition of something that the other would sponsor. But when I, was able to get, far right Republicans to sign on to the bill, I knew I had something, and I knew I had something that was going to do a lot of good. Because when we can
Right.
come together around an issue and say, no, this has to be done,
Right.
it's usually the right thing to do. And so the thing about it too, ironically, was that coming into special session, we didn't know what we were coming for, because you didn't have a copy of the bill until right before. You didn't have time to really study it. And once we're in the session, which I think people who didn't realize what was about to happen thought that this is going to be a one and done, you know, it's going to take 3 days and we're going to be done. And that's just not what happened. Many colleagues ended up getting off the bill.
Did she overestimate the support that she could create with the snap of her fingers?
I think she underestimated how important government transparency and accountability is to Arkansans, including and especially her own base. And, you know, now we all know. And, you know, obviously nobody wanted and wants to see her or especially her family who did not sign up. You know, they're not serving in a governmental role to be subject to death threats and dangers. And, you know, at the same time, we see that kind of thing happen all over. We saw what happened to the governor in Michigan.
Right.
You know, and the answer is to step up your security. The answer is to hold people accountable for making threats and doing things that are illegal.
Now that FOI bill, FOI bills typically come through the FOI coalition, which was set up legislatively.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't always happen. I think the one that Ken Hammer put through in the regular session that made some special dispensations for school districts, school boards. I don't think that one came through, or if it did, it was in passing. But this one did not. I don't think this one was sent to the coalition, was it?
It was. They had online meetings right before, and the coalition did not endorse these bills. I want to say maybe there was a silence on the final version, on the amended version. Definitely the Press Association, they were quiet. They did not endorse the final bill. But
I know they sent out emails to
Oh,
all
yeah.
newspapers, please call your senator.
And people did. I think Senator Clark Tucker worked tirelessly to make sure that some changes were made so that the final bill strictly addressed safety. And I think that, you know, when Democrats in the House, myself included, did not vote for it, it wasn't because we weren't concerned about that. It was because there was a component attached to it that basically turned the clock back so that the law applied, you know, before the governor was in office, which was problematic for all of us. But, you know, I think we were all relieved that public and governmental transparency was not gutted, and that we were able to come together as a body and as a state.
Of course, that law used to be a lot stronger, and it seems like every legislative session they come at it with their chisels and.
I bet you though next session, not so much.
Maybe not.
And
then there's that effort to put it in the Constitution.
Yeah. So, and ironically, you know, Nate Bell, who I served with and who was an arch, and I think still is an arch conservative. I mean, he is definitely libertarian-esque in his conservatism. But he's also extremely, and I'll say, and he's also extremely consistent, and I would say, you know, dedicated to the ideals that he espouses and lives by. And so, you know, I definitely respect that. Don't agree all the time, but we agree on more than a lot of people think, for sure, and this is one issue.
Talk a little about the LEARNS Act. Now, this goes back to the regular legislative session.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't have enough time in the day.
The bottom line, yeah, I mean, I could, you know, it was such a long bill, and ironically, that was a bill that was handed down at the last minute. Was it sort of, did it just sort of come out of Florida? Was it more or less just? More or less. Yeah. I mean, I won't say it came out of Florida, but I would say many of the tenets of it were consistent with what is happening in Florida, especially the CRT mess. But I got a call this morning. There are several small, predominantly white school districts that are going into distress. And I believe that there's a Thursday school board meeting in Rosebud, and the superintendent there intends to shut down that school district, is what I heard. Now, I'm not sure, and there's so much going on over there.
That's not your district, though.
No, but my point is, it's already starting to have a negative impact.
I see, yes, because they're making it, this LEARNS Act is making it so easy to skip out of public school, I guess. And
Correct.
Here's money to people who didn't need the money to send your child to private school that you were already paying for.
And I really tried to make the point, as did many teachers and administrators who came and spoke against this bill, that this bill was going to affect all school districts, irrespective of size, racial makeup, and, you know, most importantly, academic success. You know, and we're about to see that, unfortunately, and we won't go back into session to address this and to tinker with LEARNS until 2025. And it'll be interesting to see that where some of these schools are in distress and are going to be in distress, if they will be taken over by the state, monitored by the state, held for 5 years, like what you saw in Little Rock and Pine Bluff.
Yeah. The LEARNS Act is got a pretty fast pass through. I mean, I remember reading that teachers and administrators and students came to speak against it, and they were just like,
not some, everybody who spoke against LEARNS were teachers, administrators, students.
Hard to get all three of those on the same page.
Yeah,
I would
and
think.
I know that, you know, many instances, you know, you had parents writing in. Part of the problem is not only was this huge bill sort of dropped without a lot of time to dissect it and vet it, but it went through the Senate. It sailed through the Senate so quickly, went through the House, and we met all day, all night. I think we finished at around 10 o'clock. And we heard from almost 100 people. And I can tell you that an overwhelming majority of the people there were there to speak against. And the other thing I'll tell you, and I wrote notes, every single person who spoke for LEARNS, except maybe one, talked about special education. So to me, it really, when you looked at the breadth of everyone's perspective, it was either a vote against the LEARNS Act or a vote against our special education system within our public education system, which to me says, rather than gutting public education as we know it.
Let's
Fix special education.
Were they saying that we do a bad job dealing with
Oh,
special
yeah.
ed students?
Yes, and we do, and we did, and a lot of that.
Well, we used to just ignore them.
For sure. And I was at a conference earlier this year. There are very few, but there are a few states that somewhat get it right. And even the state, I looked up the list, and I'm not going to say which state because I don't want to get it wrong, but the state that was represented in the room that was on the on an internet list as being one of the most effective special education or states with effective special education programs said that we don't get it right.
Yeah.
Like we have a lot
Yeah.
that we still need to do. So it can be very tough. It can be very expensive. I mean, because when you look at how we fund healthcare for that population, for the developmentally disabled, we still have a DD list. What we call the DD list. We always have a list of people who are still looking for the resources that they're
Developmentally
eligible
disabled.
for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
So to me, the fix is there, and by doing what we're doing, what the LEARNS Act has essentially done, in my mind, is take away resources from the general population who need the resources in their local public schools.
Is this the culmination of the effort to spread charter schools?
And incorporate vouchers. I mean, I think charter schools became the thing when vouchers wouldn't pass, or they were being overturned, because of the courts. But I think efforts to stack the courts with people who, who would support vouchers, it has been successful, and therefore, vouchers have passed and they're not being quickly overturned.
In Oklahoma, they've said it's okay. I guess the Oklahoma Supreme Court has said it's okay to take state dollars and put kids in church schools, parochial schools. You think that happens here?
I don't know. That I don't know.
So you have state-sponsored religious education, I guess.
I mean, we have that. That's what we have right now. I mean, with the way that the LEARNS Act works, there's a fund, and there will be students who apply to access those funds for private dollars.
Go to Catholic High.
To go to Catholic High. And
Episcopal
what I've seen,
school.
I think I read an article last week, maybe over the weekend, that sort of indicated I think the governor and Secretary Oliva did a report on kind of where LEARNS is, and an overwhelming number of the people who have accessed funds are people who were already in the private school. So basically what we're doing is taking public school dollars and supplementing or providing the tuition funding for private school kids.
Right, and it's not needs-based.
Nope.
So people who had enough money to send their kids to private schools now are being given money.
That's right. And not just the parochial schools, also all private schools and homeschools
Homeschool,
are
right.
also eligible.
Right.
And the crazy thing about that is, in the first year of LEARNS, there is a 1.5% cap. In the second year of LEARNS, there will be a 3% cap. Then in the third year of LEARNS, there will be no cap at all whatsoever.
Cap being, this is how many people can
How
move
many
away.
can be
So 100%
eligible
can run away
for
from public school.
homeschool education being supported by these vouchers. The only cap will be, a non-legislated cap, or really a legislated cap, and that'll be budget-based.
I was reading the LEARNS Act, or an analysis of the LEARNS Act, and you know, the the playing field is not level between kids who go to public school and kids who go to these private schools. Did you all see that when you were analyzing that legislation? It's like if you're in private school, these students do this, but the public school kids have to do this, this, and this.
Yeah, I mean, there was a Republican legislator who filed a bill to ensure that the standards would be the same, that the oversight
Right.
would be the same. And, you know, I had a colleague literally say in committee that you're just trying to, he said something to the effect of, like, why would we do this and risk our private schools closing or something? I was like, what? Did he just say that? But I was like, yeah.
Yeah, we don't
That's
want
where we
to.
are.
We don't want to dissuade them from being in
Right.
existence.
So if that's the case, then maybe this oversight process doesn't work. Maybe if it's harmful to the private schools, then maybe it's harmful to the public schools, and we need to fix that rather than hand over, you know, public dollars for private institutions.
Or, as you say, homeschool.
And what we're going to see is, you know, small jurisdictions shut down.
Small
And
school districts,
Small school districts.
like
right.
Rosebud.
That's
perhaps.
right. And, you know, for example, in Rosebud, those parents are not going to have choice because they won't have a school, forget public, private, you know, within a 2-hour radius. That's
And-
what I was told this morning. And even if it's an hour, even if it's a half hour
Yeah.
versus 10 minutes, that changes a student's ability to do well if you have to be on a bus all day. So then what does that do? Does that mean that my parent now has to associate me with homeschool? Is that it? Or do we move?
Yeah.
You know,
I think the Marvell Elaine decision scared some people. I know it got
not
brought up.
enough.
Yeah, I know it got brought up here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if the Pine Bluff School District actually fails?
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's still a thing. It's still an issue. I mean,
yeah,
and I'll say this.
do we just turn it all over to Friendship Academy? And
I mean, people don't want that. People want options for their children. People want quality for their children. People want safety for their children. I want that for all of our children, you know. I think that, and maybe this is a transition you're not ready for, and let me know, but that's why I have pushed so hard for so many years for there to be a Pine Bluff Promise, a scholarship associated with Go Forward, the same way that the El Dorado Promise, which was what the whole initiative was called,
right,
was tied to the scholarship that Murphy Oil supported.
can you hold that thought for a second?
I will hold that thought.
I want to ask one more question about the tenor of state government these
Yes,
days, and
yeah.
it is hard to ignore the fact that a reliable Republican, Rex Nelson, who's worked for Governor Huckabee's father,
Mm-hmm.
And he has been in and around Republican politics for a long, long time, and he has written a couple of just scalding columns about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and then this past week just referred to her as just a given that she is the worst governor since Governor Orville Faubus. And he says some of his points were, you know, we're just a state of 3 million people. We really don't have the time or resources for somebody to split us apart. That we work better together. So, do you see that? What is your take on that? Do we see some unnecessary? I know I have noticed it, and Nelson mentioned in his column that anytime the left is referred to. It's like the radical left in capital letters. And when she first started running for governor, I thought, who is she talking about? Because really Arkansas, even liberals in Arkansas are probably pretty conservative on a national level.
And then at the same time, though, part of what is being done is changing the definition of radical. And if we're going to tie, political radicalism to policy positions like a safe and accessible abortion for women who choose to do so, and especially for women whose doctors dictate that their lives depend on it, then that would make a majority of the population of Arkansans radical.
Right.
If we're going to talk about, gun safety, common sense gun safety laws, that would make Arkansans radical. And so I think part of that is, an effort to dissuade people from utilizing their own critical thinking and taking a position that they really want to take, because it's kind of like what was done back in the day to dissuade white Southerners from supporting candidates and supporting people of color whose rights were being abridged and who were being terrorized. If you said anything, you'll get it worse.
We will vilify you.
You'll lose your job. I have a friend whose stepmother and her family were in the middle of the Central High crisis, and he was telling me how his step-uncle was friends with Elizabeth Eckford, and how he did not shun her. He would be friendly, just like kids are supposed to do. And they got death threats.
How dare you?
Yeah. So, I think that there are a lot of Arkansans here. There are Arkansans right now who are serving and running as Republicans, and they're Democrats, have always been Democrats. Positions are Democrats. I can't tell you how many times, some of my colleagues have voted a certain way on an issue and then whispered, I wish I could have voted like you did, or.
But they know they would get.
But I had to, because I'll get primaried, or I got threatened, that I'm going to get primaried, or. So, I think that going back to this rhetoric about Democrats and Republicans and rhetorics, I think that Rex Nelson represents kind of a reckoning that I think is going to play out in the next election, where, many Republicans or Democrats who have, identified or switched parties, they just want a safe place to live. They don't want all of this negative policy making and these divides that are created when they don't need to be. As far as guns, people want their gun rights. They want to protect their homes and businesses. They want to hunt, but they also want their kids to be safe and other people's kids to be safe. They don't want, everybody to have access to military grade automatic or semi-automatic weapons. People don't want that. We're all tired of mass shootings, and we're all afraid. If you have to think about what's going to happen to you when you go to church and the grocery store and music festivals, what does that do to an economy of 3 million people when people are afraid to go outside? So, I think that Rex Nelson represents a great deal of proportion of our state who are just fed up with the Trump-style politics and extreme anything. When they talk a lot about extreme left, And to be honest, and I'll say this, because I respect Rex and agree with a great deal of what he says and writes. At the same time, you know, where were folks when many of these efforts and a lot of this rhetoric being spewed started? And it didn't just start with Trump. I mean, I could point to things in Arkansas and in the country that directly led to this, and people were quiet. People, you know, rode with it, and even by the time we got to Trump's election, it's like, oh, he doesn't really mean that. Like, how do you know? And why do you think he doesn't mean that? Aren't you scared that he might?
Yeah.
You know, so.
And apparently that doesn't matter because his ratings are awfully high.
But I think it's also a reflection of a deep divide in the Republican Party, not in the nation and in Arkansas. You know, not only are we dealing with a journalist and a politico who served in the governor's father's administration being extremely critical of her within the first year.
Right.
In Washington, you saw the dismantling of a speakership before that, like within months. So, I mean, there's some deep divide in Republican politics, and it won't change until and unless more people do what Rex Nelson is doing.
Sometimes I mean, there is like the Asa Hutchinson version of Republicanism, and then the Sarah Sanders.
But there's no room for that. I mean,
no, there's no room for that anymore.
You know, Governor Hutchinson was really being heralded as one of the best governors that we've ever had, because he was very measured in terms fiscally, right? And
but his vetoes, he knew his vetoes were going to get.
Really, what it really was, if he had not been as assertive, I won't say aggressive because he wasn't aggressive enough for me on this, but if he had not been so assertive and nonpartisan during COVID,
Right.
you would see him ascended way higher in this Republican presidential process. But he's shunned because the Republican Party is still being controlled, you know, by forever Trumpers.
Yeah.
So.
I was, you know, the new version of the COVID shot is out now, or it's coming out pretty soon. And I was thinking of, it's like, yeah, I get some of the anxiety over how we handled life. But, you know, people were dropping like flies.
Oh.
And it's easy now to look back and sort of, it's like, just think about, oh, we closed businesses and we...
Talking about that like we just, you know, we're doing it arbitrarily.
Oh, yeah,
and
la,
didn't
la,
have
la.
to.
But kids
Yeah.
were going to school and it's like, well, they're not going to get that sick, but they're going to take it home to dad who's got a medical condition, and certainly grandparents
And
who
that
are just old.
happened. We had at least one superintendent die. We had teachers who died. You know, I mean, we were ground zero here in Pine Bluff.
Yeah.
And, you know, people were administrators, they were afraid to let people know. It was like The Walking Dead,
It was
you know, that show.
I don't know that there was a perfect fix for that, but
And I will say, I do believe that Governor Hutchinson, in the state that we were in, literally and figuratively, did an incredible job of keeping the people of this state safe while keeping as much of us open, businesses, parks, whatever. Like, he did his best to maintain as much normalcy as possible.
Yeah, it seemed like he was reacting to the facts as they came, and was taking measured action instead of thinking of how's this going to look.
Well, and basing it on science, like
Yeah.
basing it on real life safety and science. He focused on safety and science, and we wanted that. And we didn't want the science to bear out what it did all the time, or safety measures, and to bear out what they did. But I got COVID early, and I got COVID right before they started.
Oh, did
the
you?
CDC told people we need to wear masks. So I was going to the store.
When was that? Was that late
That
2020?
was in early 2020, like March.
Yeah, that was ground zero
Yeah,
here.
March, April, early April maybe.
That's a little scary.
It was very scary because at the time we were all fixed to our televisions watching what was happening in New York. And so on the West Coast, Washington and California, mostly Washington, because that's where people were flying in from Asia. And on the East Coast in New York, it was amazing that our whole country was shut down and we didn't know what was going to happen.
They had to bring in
I remember what
like-
that felt like.
refrigerated trucks to hold all the dead.
And still couldn't do it. I still talk to, like, if you know a New Yorker and you talk to them about that time, they are triggered right now today talking about it. Everybody in New York knew people who had died. This big metropolis of a city that doesn't sleep, where people are always walking and taking the subway,
Yeah.
was completely quiet. And you were looking out your window at tents on the corner because there wasn't enough room for the dead in the hospital.
Right.
We can't begin to imagine. I know that there was some of that going on at the hospital, at JRMC, and our hospitals were struggling. We did not have to figure out where to put dead people out in the street.
Yeah.
So I remember what it was like. I remember knowing before I got tested that I had it. And my mother, wanting to come hug me, and I'm like, get away from me. Because she didn't want to believe it. And I had read a story about a woman about my age who that same thing happened, and her mother hugged her, and her mother died. So, I have no patience to talk to people who want to, engage in revisionist history about what that time was like. I remember what it was like. I remember what it felt like, thinking that I was going to die, thinking that I might have killed my parents because I was close to them and didn't wear a mask, even though they told us we didn't need a mask. I remember all of that, and remember being fearful for everybody in Pine Bluff, especially men and women who were incarcerated.
Oh yeah.
It was
Church
so many
groups.
issues. Yes.
We're
Churches
gonna
who
we're
refused
gonna
to
have church.
close.
Okay, well that church up around, was it Greers Ferry or Heber Springs?
What was going to happen to our businesses? We're already a very challenged, vulnerable county and city. And, how is this going to affect our local businesses? Who was going to get the resources? How are we going to make sure our small businesses got those resources?
Right.
It was hard.
It was hard.
It was hard. And, I just had it again. 2 weeks ago, I just got COVID again. I was
Really?
traveling, yeah. Last time I talked to you on the phone, I was on my way home, and I came home early because there was going to be bad weather. And I remember sitting next to this older lady across the aisle, and she was coughing. And I have to say, I wasn't wearing a mask. Most people on that plane were not wearing a mask, including this lady. And she was coughing, and I remember thinking in my mind, and I'm not going to say the curse words I thought in my mind, but I know this woman, and I'm just playing with COVID. And I just, I was like, can't be, But I just got so used to being out in the public and
Sure.
not worrying. And my friends all called me Henrietta Lacks because I kept the virus. I tested positive for the virus the first time I had it for almost a month. So I had the symptoms for about 4 days. But I tested positive for a month. And I didn't go anywhere until I tested negative just because you didn't know, right?
Our son flew home from California, and he wore a hazmat suit. he had the this and I said, how did you ever get through security?
That is hilarious.
They were all, the people on the plane were like,
I understand.
That's when it was bad. I mean, we were just learning as every day
You
was
were
like,
learning as you go.
it was like, so we need to leave our mail out in the sun for a couple of days. Is that where we are? And it's like, if you're running on a trail, can that person, Anyway.
But it was it was extremely contagious.
So let's talk about the Pine Bluff School District. We talked about education. Pine Bluff just got removed from state control.
Yes.
Now there's some friction there. We're not going to be actually electing the last school board member for 5 years.
Yeah, and I disagree with that. There was a member on the board who also took issue with that and felt as though we needed to have.
Let's just do it.
Let's elect our board.
Let's just elect a staggered board, but all right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought, and then the rationale of the board we have now was to maintain stability. We want to basically slow roll, and that's what their word, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but we wanted a slow piecemeal process is what they wanted to ensure stability.
I'm not sure what the plus side of that is.
I think, and also apparently it wasn't a guarantee that everybody who was on the board and had the institutional memory and had done all the work would run again if they had to. And so, principally, I just think that's not democratic, and it kind of flies in the face of what we say we want for people, for us to have our school district back, for it to be locally led and run and be accountable to the people. So if you're not running for election, how are you? So I think that because there was such major support on the part of the board for the proposal that passed, that unfortunately might be what we end up with.
Right. So is there we passed the millage.
Yeah.
So we're getting a new high school.
Mm-hmm.
How far away are we from like a happy day for the school district? We talked about this a little earlier, but a school district where people want to bring their kids instead of, I've got a job in Pine Bluff, I'll live somewhere else, because that's where school districts can be relied on.
I'll say again, so let me say this. I think the happy day relief in a way is here, and in a way will never be here. So I'll say in the way that it's here is we have laws, policies, resources, great teachers, people who are here because they want to be here and who are raising great families, run solid businesses, are solid employees for other businesses. That's who comprises our population of students and parents and teachers. That happy day is here. Could it be better? Absolutely. And it's going to be better if we make sure that we use our votes, our local resources, our state resources to support this school district in the way that it deserves. The never be here happy day, you know, if you look back to the Lakeview lawsuit and decision and what it was supposed to do and what it has been doing instead, if you look at LEARNS, and just, I guess, look at the fact that there is always a reaction to action. And so I think any move toward the equity and adequacy that, you know, Bill Llewellyn, Jimmy Wilson, Judge Kilgore, and others, Herschel Cleveland, many who were a part of that at that time, and I had the really the privilege to have worked at the Bureau and worked for the Legislative Black Caucus at the time. Everybody who worked on those issues, it's not supposed to be like this. And I go back further. Everyone who was a part of what led to and what was supposed to be implemented from the Brown versus Board decision, it's not supposed to be like this. You know, God rest his soul, attorney, Representative John Walker, and what he did in and for the Little Rock School District, and what he did up until the day he died in fighting for equity and adequacy and the kind of education that our kids deserve. There will always be someone who loses when we share resources and we establish equality and equity, so that Black students, Native American students, Latino students, poor white students get the help that they need to go from a promise of equality to a reality of equity. We have to remember that. It's never going to be a happy day, because there will always be someone who, when the happy day seemingly comes, they already been working to dismantle that.
Move the goalposts.
Absolutely.
So you're saying the LEARNS Act makes
or
it,
just blow up the field.
yeah, that it just makes it harder for a district, I guess you could say like any district, but Pine Bluff, it makes it harder to get to that happy place.
I think that I think we have to start ignoring them and focusing on us. So we in this community, you know, poor families, wealthier families, Black, white families, Latino families, like, that's who is in Pine Bluff. If we're not working together to ensure that every kid who comes through those doors is safe and can get a quality education, has the books he or she needs, there are teachers there who are not substitute teachers,
Right.
teachers there who
Certified.
are there to teach them the curriculum, and the curriculum is not being sideswiped by people who are intimidated by the history of this country. If we're not doing that, then we can't get there. And that doesn't have as much to do with the people who are against, because you're always going to have people against and who are scared and who are greedy. It's those of us who are citizens and have the vote and work and pay taxes and live here. What are we going to do together? And I think that we're seeing some of that, and I think that debate is healthy. I think that you have to challenge. I'm going to go back to, you know, Go Forward and the Pine Bluff Promise. You know,
We're almost there.
People want that. You know, people want for folks to work together. People want folks to do their jobs.
I remember we had Barbara Warren in here, and I asked her about charter schools, and I said, does the presence of charter schools make it harder for you to do your job? And she said, yes. She said they do. And I think it was not long after that she was not the superintendent anymore. And I never, you know, they never said why she was not. And I was just wondering.
A lovely person and tried really, really, really hard to make the things happen that needed to happen amid a political environment that was impossible for her
Yeah.
to work in. And, you know, the structure of public education with all of the gains that were made, whether it was from the court decisions, whether it's from millages, whether it's from the unions and the education associations, all of those things kind of came together because we saw what had happened before, so how do we make it better? I said to her, and many people said in general, number one, to bring someone in to a relatively large district with serious issues who didn't have experience in bringing back a school district was already a challenge. But then to say, we're going to give you two.
This one's sinking,
It was
and this
unfair.
one's low in the water.
It was unfair
Yeah.
to her. It was unfair, most definitely, to the kids and to this school district, to our city. It just was unfair. We had nowhere to go but exactly where we went.
On more than one occasion, I heard people say it was engineered to fail, or we shouldn't be surprised that it failed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can unload your El Dorado promise thought. You know, I see Morel went to El Dorado and came back and wrote a few stories about, and to be honest, it was you bring into the conversation the narrative of what's going on in El Dorado that made us go down and just kick the tires and see what's going on down here. And it hasn't been we're doing this so we're great. I mean, but it's like it has moved the needle in the positive direction. Yes. Job growth. But there were a couple of facets of that. One was the promise, and even though Murphy Oil has moved on, that money, I guess that foundation still exists. Lots of money in it. So they have a director, and they still, if you're in the school this period of time from early till graduation, you get X amount to go to college. I mean, so that exists. And then there's the Go Forward-ish kind of a situation where they have a sales tax, and but without the Go Forward, someone would say, I want to do X. And they come to the city council, and the city's elected people, decide, okay, that sounds good. Here's funding for that. So is there another way? In the conversation about Go Forward, they'll say, well, if you don't have a plan, if you don't like Go Forward, what's your plan? And I think the answer to that was, well, maybe something like El Dorado has.
Absolutely. The thing about El Dorado is El Dorado's, even the process leading up to the tax and the El Dorado promise was an open process. It was a process that engaged people in their community, and it was a process that culminated in a true plan with a budget, with promised deliverables, and those are the things that I've virtually begged for. I wanted to support Go Forward. We need something. I'm not one of those people that says, we don't need a tax. I'm not one of those people that thinks that Simmons Bank is evil. I don't think that. I think that Tommy May, in particular, has been an incredible cheerleader and public servant in this area in many ways, and that he still gets up every day and does things in Jefferson County, for UAPB, is admirable. At the same time, you know, there's a way to do things, and we are not in a time and environment where it's appropriate, where it's beneficial for one entity to commission meetings in the community by application, by, you know, people signing disclosure agreements, and then you come out with a book of ideas and say that a city should tax itself, and then we set up an urban renewal agency to allow for public-private partnerships. Now, Pine Bluff is not El Dorado. El Dorado isn't Pine Bluff. But dare I say, El Dorado was a smaller city with similar and probably worse challenges because they didn't have the benefit that we have in terms of our industrial park, the number of banks and credit unions that are headquartered here, a 4-year university and a 2-year college, you know, transportation hub with an airport, railways, barges in the river, a lake. Like, there are certain things that we have that we could leverage that El Dorado did not, and they still saw fit to say, hey, we are going to focus on our infrastructure. We're going to focus on projects that lay the groundwork to make El Dorado attractive for tourism, for events, for small business and large business. And we are going to focus on education so we can stop the bleeding, because we know that we can't engage people to move here and to come here, to work here, to start businesses here, if we aren't doing anything to make our schools attractive, right? To keep our young people here. So it wasn't rocket science, and it worked well for them, because while El Dorado didn't become a place where people all of a sudden started moving to, El Dorado stopped a lot of the flight that was existing.
It gave people
And
a reason to want
absolutely.
to be
People saw that as this is an opportunity for my kids. And so likewise, here in Pine Bluff, there are so many people who come here and work, and they go right on over to Whitehall, to some of the surrounding small
Woodlawn,
towns,
Sheridan.
Woodlawn, Sheridan, even Altimer, which is a much smaller town. They would rather live where their family home is, or in a smaller area, or where they feel safe, and come here and work. But that means they're taking those dollars. That means we keep losing people so that our housing stock is empty. That means we keep losing dollars in our schools because people are taking their kids out of the schools. So it just stands to reason that part of what we need to and needed to do with Go Forward was to do something bold, something significant that paid attention to education and public safety, period. And for me, you know, those coupled with accountability and public transparency, as well as a much stronger partnership with UAPB, were the 4 things I needed to endorse that tax. So the accountability would mean that, you know, the city, Go Forward, and Urban Renewal would say, this is how we are going to make information available to the public as to how we spend this money. This is what we're going to do in the next 7 years. This is going to be our timeline. Here's our budget. Here's the process for contracts. You know, or there isn't one. You know, whatever. But when you go in and you just say, hey, we're going to get this money, and then you send all of the money to one entity of government, you know.
Not even a government, really.
Well, you're
City
saying
government,
to-
so it all goes to the mayor's office, one entity within city government.
Right.
That to me is unfair to her. That's too much responsibility, too much authority for one entity when we have elected officials responsible for the purse strings in this city. If there was going to be a role for the public-private entity, what is the oversight there? I talked about this before any of this happened because I knew, just working with the state, what can happen, and I knew that in order for us, I knew that we were going to need more than 7 years, and I knew that in order for us to galvanize the community to buy in the city, not to go to Little Rock, not to go to other places, but to buy in the city, you had to be excited about a tax. How do you get excited about a tax? You get excited about a tax because you know the revenue is going to go towards something that's going to make us better. You get excited about it because you know what it's doing. You know what people are doing. You get excited about it when these things will not only benefit you, but it'll benefit your kids. It'll benefit your community. You can see where it'll go. You know, it'll benefit your quality of life. And so it wasn't enough to just say we have a quality of life thrust here and an education thrust there, and all of the and it's. I'm not one of those people that says Go Forward did nothing, but they didn't do as much as they said they were going to do, and they didn't do as much as they said they did when they were campaigning for the reauthorization of the tax. And so, without even addressing that, we're about to be dinged in audit this Thursday. I mean, I used to serve on audit. I don't see where there is like a whole article, let's get ready because this is about to be ugly. And it's not unreasonable. People are concerned, and the way that we can fix this is to come together and work together. We can address these issues, but I've said from the very beginning that the taxes that are collected and the taxes that are spent for Go Forward should have been made available on line item, copies of receipts. Put all of that on the internet so people can see where the tax money is going and feel good about how it's being spent. That's how you get people to support it and come back and say, yeah, I'll vote for that again. This has been great. That's why El Dorado, I think theirs was 7 years. They came back and got another 10. And they did that because they saw the sidewalks and the infrastructural changes. They were able to say, we were able to bring in, as a result of the El Dorado Promise, 70 new jobs. This is what that means for the economy. And then, of course, they were able to boast and show how these scholarships were affecting the kids and how it was keeping people in the school district and what that meant for those kids, how they were doing better on their standardized test scores, how they were now going to four-year colleges and universities. Now, we don't have to do ours exactly like that. We have a 2- and 4-year college right here. We could start out by saying, we'll give you a full tuition if you meet this standard. You will have a full tuition scholarship at UAPB and CARC. And also, we could do post secondary education where you don't even have to go to 4-year or 2-year college. You might say, hey, I want to do a journeyman program because I want to work for Entergy. I want to come back and I want to live in Jefferson County and I want to work for Entergy. We don't have a journeyman program here. You have to go out of state. Why not make it so that that young person can get the tuition to go out of state, do that program, and come back and work a certain number of years in exchange? There's so many ways we can do it. And I've said this many times before, we need to bookend our this program here, our Pine Bluff Promise, to also support high quality pre-K. That could attract families who need that, who don't qualify for public assistance, but don't make enough to pay for high quality pre-K? What if we use the city and partner with the city to certify high quality pre-K programs in this city, and then supplement the tuition so that kids can come here for pre-K, go here K through 12, and come out the other side with a scholarship to go to college or for some post-secondary training. That would attract people. That would keep people from leaving. And the beautiful thing about Pine Bluff is we don't have to rely on one entity. So I talked to somebody about this who said, well, people kept saying, well, we don't have a Murphy Oil. We don't need a Murphy Oil. Guess what we have? Simmons Bank, who's opening up branches all over the region.
And own banks all over the region.
That's correct. They have a great foundation. And it shouldn't be just them. We have a Reliance Bank. We have a Cotton Belt Credit Union, FTB Credit Union.
Stone Bank.
Stone Bank. Like, we have banks and credit unions, but we don't have to stop there. We have a very strong presence of entities right here. I mean, Tyson and Entergy have a strong presence here. We have an industrial park full of businesses. We've got Evergreen. If we share in the responsibility and the investment, it doesn't have to weigh on one entity, and the return would be and could be incredible. What if Go Forward promised that to Pine Bluffians? What if Go Forward said, hey, we are going to headquarter in the business incubator at UAPB, and we're going to support small businesses who want to do that while still supporting the makerspace for kids? What if they did that? What if they said, we're going to share every penny that we collect and every penny we spend on the internet, including what the private organization collects? You don't even have to reveal your donor list, but you can say, hey, this is how much we raised last year, and this is what we're spending it on in conjunction. These are the activities of urban renewal, and these are the activities of the city. Guess what we would have? We would have unity in our city government, because who would go against something that benefits that many people? What if Go Forward said, we're going to have a community center for kids in every ward? That's what people want. We don't have any business doing what private business should do. We need to set the infrastructure so that private business will come here and thrive. We have a whole alliance. And I'll end in my remarks about Go Forward with the public safety piece. We need to do something about public safety. But as we heard from Joni Alexander, we had a public safety tax that now goes to general revenue.
Right.
There is no way that we should support a public safety tax that does not specifically fund better lighting in this city and a camera system. People think we have a camera system. We do not. Many of these cameras don't even belong to the city. They belong to the transportation department. We do not have a camera system to help our law enforcement fight crime and investigate crimes in an environment where people are afraid to come forward. So we're leaving our law enforcement out there with nothing but some guns. We have to invest in those two things if we're going to get a handle on our gun violence issue here, and if we are going to get a handle on our public safety issue. Because it's not even just about the gun violence. It's about burglaries that still happen, robberies. There's a gentleman who I still have to call back, I'm not going to say his name, who got robbed by a woman who was on drugs, fought him for his gun. He ended up shooting her. He still doesn't have his gun back, and she's still not in jail. She's still not going through the process because she was let out of the hospital. And so, of course, he and his daughter are concerned for his safety. But we also have a police department where people come here and work to go work in other departments.
Of course, last week you mentioned gun violence. You know, on the anniversary, the 3rd year anniversary of Kevin Collins, I guess we got pretty close to having another police officer shot. I mean, they shot the car he was in, and he had some minor injuries from that, and I'm guessing that it went through a window and the spray from the glass or something, or it hit something in the car. That's pretty close to another
It's terrible.
tragedy.
But I didn't even realize we didn't have an effective camera system. The Capitol Police at the state capitol have an incredible surveillance and camera system all around the Capitol in the city. And they partner with the city police. We should have that. How do we keep dealing with being upset about the narrative and the crime bluff? And by the way, I don't let anybody say crime bluff to me. But how do we recognize that we have these major issues specific to gun violence, and we don't have a sophisticated camera system that our police department can use to help them monitor, prevent, and investigate and solve crimes? The other thing that people don't know, and Camara Seals and I and Michael McCrae worked together several years ago, it was during COVID, to gather data
Right.
and to make recommendations to the city
It was
council.
eye-opening.
Pine Bluff, on all other crime levels, had gone down. We just got our update to that, so from 2020 to 2023, but from 2010 to 2020, crime had gone down in every area, significantly outpacing population decline, significantly. Rape, car theft, burglary, robbery, assault, all of those crimes had gone down significantly. Our problem is gun violence, homicide.
Right.
So, that's
Which we're 6, 7 times the national average.
I will not support a tax that doesn't address the issues I've just mentioned. I will not support a public safety tax, a forever public safety tax, without specifics as to how we will improve the lighting throughout the city, not just in the main thoroughfares, and a camera system for our city and for our law enforcement.
Okay, so you're a no vote
I'm
from
a
the public.
no.
So the original Go Forward tax, I think at the time, it passed pretty easily, and I think a lot of people, we had buildings falling down, Main Street was closed, and I think a lot of people were like, well, thank God somebody's doing something, but you were against it then.
I was against it then because I knew it needed to be done right. Otherwise, we'd have what we have now.
Right.
And so now you have, allegations of corruption. You have real live situations where small businesses have not been appropriately engaged to benefit and to participate with some of the events. Allegations of missing and mishandled funds. If we had the right structures and safeguards and transparency in place, none of that would happen.
So you're against the renewal of the tax coming up in November?
Absolutely. But my first issue is the Pine Bluff Promise Scholarship that we
Right.
need to incorporate. We can't keep pointing to El Dorado and saying, oh, well, it worked there, and that's why we need the tax. They don't have an urban renewal. They did not use their tax for private business initiatives.
Well, they don't have a Go Forward filter.
Exactly.
You go directly to the council, elected.
And let me say this though, but I mentioned we're different. We have different needs. We're a different city. We still are a larger city. It's not so much that there is a Go Forward entity, because they promised to raise private funds and to help with some of these initiatives, And all of that is great. You know, what they've done with teachers to earn their master's degree. I don't know
Right.
if they're required to stay here if they take these resources, but all of that is great. But it shouldn't be limited to one entity. We have a whole governmental infrastructure with people who have really done great things and really are responsible for a lot of the growth that we have seen. Our economic development department and previous tax dollars were responsible for the aquatic center, the downtown infrastructural changes that we have seen. That they did that, not Go Forward. Go Forward contributed, yes, but the planning, the dollars, the effort belonged to our city government officials and our workers. And to say that they can't or they didn't do that is an affront, but it also takes away from the fact that we need to be figuring out how we sustain our growth. If we don't have a city government that can and does work to be a part of the sustainability aspect of the model, which I don't think exists, then how do we maintain and how do we truly grow? So, you know, I think we have to do a better job of strengthening our infrastructure, particularly our A&P Commission, our Economic Development Department, and Parks and Rec. Those three entities are extremely important. We need to be working together
Quality of
to
life.
engage the federal government to come into Pine Bluff and truly develop Bayou Bartholomew. We are home to the longest bayou in the world.
Right.
Why wouldn't we develop that to tie into so many other natural state attractions and features? You know, so there's a lot of work to be done. It's not rocket science. We can come together and do this. And I'll say this, voting no to Go Forward doesn't mean that we can't come back in March during the primary election and still vote in a tax that makes sense and addresses some of the things we've talked about today, and still provide the dollars necessary before the funding ends, I think next year.
Late next year.
Yeah,
September,
like in September.
Yeah.
So we still have time. I think that this was an effort because the vote was so close. And of course, that's before all of the controversy came out with regard to the funds missing with urban renewal and some of the transparency issues and the overstepping in access to city funds on the part of Go Forward. None of that had come out before the last vote. The thing that's distinctive about this vote is this is not an election year.
Right.
So this is still a special election where people will not have the benefit of signage and other elections and candidate forums. So many people won't be as aware. The vote turnout will be low, and I think they're banking on it
Well, they
winning
just need 100
because
votes.
it's a special election, right?
Yeah.
I think that it further divides the city. I think that we need to be working on a plan for an election for a tax in March that better addresses the problems that we've seen and that can bring people together. I'm committed to helping do that, and I think that if it fails, and I believe it will in November, that our city leaders and our private business leaders will be poised to sit down with citizens, with the NAACP. You know, I don't have any personal axe to grind against anybody. And I really do believe that people who have been involved with Go Forward just want to see the growth and just are doing what they think they need to do so that we can move forward. But there's a right way to do things, and there's a unifying way to do things, because we're still a democracy, and you still have citizens who deserve to know the truth, that deserve to know where their tax dollars are going, and who deserve to be a part of the process. And so I hope and pray that we will get there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You had said you would be willing to take some questions. Are there questions?
No questions, just a few comments, but no questions.
Okay.
I talked enough.
You answered everybody's questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I just would ask that people be involved, that people do their homework. People feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Because
What's the best way to do that?
you can do it
Email?
online, but you can email me at vivian.flowers@arkansashouse.com.
No. .com or .gov?
You know what? I don't know. I want to say it's
It's probably .gov.
.gov. Oh, wow. I'm on here. Well, you know what, though? Just call me.
Okay.
Just call me.
And well, you can go through the House, Arkansas House,
Yes.
and get all that contact information.
Yes,
on there.
501. And actually, yes, you can definitely go to the House. And I'm sorry, I don't know it by heart. I have so many email addresses and phone numbers.
Sure.
But, and definitely you can always call the House at 501-682-7771 and
So-
leave me a message.
You're running for re-election.
Yes.
Do you have an opponent?
No, not
Nobody's
right now.
following.
Usually the Libertarians come out and have an opponent.
So with the House candidate, it's like you're always running for re-election.
For sure.
You know, it's just like
They say that the House is closest to the people, and
Yeah.
we are. We're consistently having to campaign and tell what we've done and ask for support and raise money, and it should be that way because we truly are the closest. I
Well,
think,
I want to say in
citizens.
this forum that if you do get an opponent, I'll be glad to have that person on the and give them
Yeah, for sure.
a platform. Thank you again for coming in. It's been
Thank
a
you.
while
Thank you so much.
since we have spoken. I know anytime I've tried to track you down, you're on one coast or the other at conferences. I know you stay busy, so thanks for
And in
taking
Little Rock, at our meetings.
time out to come in.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for what you do. It's not always comfortable, and I've been reading the stories that you all have been publishing, and they're hard-hitting and sometimes hard to read, but it's the truth, and that's what's super important. One of my heroes, Sheroes, is Ida B. Wells. Not very many people understand her contribution to journalism as well as to civil rights, and she was a founder.
Right. Yeah.
She was one of the founders of the NAACP. And
I still use her in my journalism classes I teach.
She's just awesome, and she was a child of formerly enslaved people who were killed. She raised her brothers and sisters in Memphis and ran a paper, and she was so about it and so strong that she had people making death threats. And her answer was not to shut down public transparency. You
can't FOI anything about me.
She was threatened not to get on the train, and she got on there anyway and had her gun and protected herself and wrote the truth and did what she needed to do. She and Mary Church Terrell fought against the lynching campaign against black men, women, and children all across the country. And before there was flight, commercial flight that was available to everybody, they took ships over to England, Scotland, and Ireland to go worldwide with their campaign to get assistance from other countries to draw attention. And I think that some people, I say all that to say some people would call that CRT, but what that really is history. We
That's
need to
right.
know it, and we need to prevent it from happening again. And
We could have a
recognize
whole
it.
nother day on CRT.
Or not. And just fight against that mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a part of it though, for sure. So,
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eplina Colvin, thank you for putting this together. She is the producer of this, and this is her brainchild. And each one of these, I think we reach a lot of times different people than read the newspaper with this format.
Yeah.
So thank you, Eplina.
We say all the time that